bought the replacement bulb for that light back there so I could film at the other area, and then realized it was the right kind of bulb. It was a warm light instead of a daylight bulb, so that's unfortunate. Hi everyone, I'm Chauncey Nebula, and today let's talk about what is appropriate for 3D printing and what's not. I recently bought a 3D printer, and yesterday I got it up and running for the very first time. And I was looking through all the cool stuff that I could 3D print, all the STL files that are out there, and I started asking myself, which of these should I print? Now, I don't mean what should I print as in what is my order of priorities. I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there that is a direct copy of a product made by a company. This is especially prevalent for Games Workshop products. There's a lot of stuff for 40K and Age of Sigmar out there. But it does put me in a bit of a moral quandary. On the one hand, 3D printing something is way cheaper for me. But on the other hand, I could be supporting intellectual property theft. When someone puts up a 3D file, an STL file, of a Predator tank, or a Lehman Russ, or a Carnifex or something, and it's identical to the design that Games Workshop has made, that is intellectual property theft. That is just straight out and out stealing. Now, it's not really stealing if I print the file, but if I download the file or pay for it, I am supporting theft. So it makes me wonder what is and is not appropriate to 3D print. Now, there are three major points that I want to talk about: cost, individual creativity, and accessibility. First, let's talk about cost. A large portion of the things that I see that are straight copies of some actual product are things that are very expensive to buy the official kits for. I'm talking Forge World products, I'm talking $60 tanks that you're going to need a lot of. Generally, it's things that you're going to need to sink a lot of money into to get. Now, you can find 3D printable files for pretty much everything under the sun these days. But there are definitely higher concentrations of things that are very expensive than there are of things that are cheap. Now, the simple fact of the matter is that a lot of Forge World products are hundreds of dollars for a single model. Yes, they are resin and sometimes metal, but they're just really expensive. For a lot of people, that is just not possible. If you don't have $400 to spend on a Forge World tank, then you're not going to buy the Forge World tank. But it won't cost you nearly as much to print it. Sure, you'll maybe pay out a couple $100s for the printer, but after that, you're really only going to be spending your money on filament, which is like $25 a roll generally. So from that perspective, it makes sense to 3D print things so that you simply have access to them. And a lot of these Forge World products, while not being broken, are maybe a little bit pay to win. And since Warhammer in particular and a lot of other games have very strong competitive mindsets, sometimes you need a power boost in order to stand a chance. Now, there are definitely some games, like Blood and Plunder, that don't require you to use their miniatures in their game. In fact, Firelock Games, who makes Blood and Plunder, don't make models for every single thing that's in their game. So you have to either 3D print or go to a third party for some of these models. Generally, you see a lot of people 3D printing ships. I myself have a couple of 3D printed ships, and they're quite nice. Especially since the resin ships that Firelock Games makes are not cheap. In many ways, I think that is kind of the drive behind a lot of people wanting to 3D print is they either want to print terrain and they don't want to have to scratch build it or buy it, or they want to print models because it's cheaper than just buying the official ones. Usually, though, you do still have to buy the 3D printable models. If you want really nice, high-quality ones, you generally need to subscribe to a Patreon or purchase the models, which leads us into the second point, individual creativity. While there are a lot of models out there that are straight copies of an actual official product, there are far more that are not. The majority of 3D printable models for any miniature wargame are alternate sculpts or alternate designs for a lot of different things. In Star Wars Legion, you have every possible combination of armor for stormtroopers and clones, tons of unique sculpts, tons of things that aren't in the game officially, but people want a proxy. For Warhammer, you've got tons and tons of different styles of Imperial Guardsmen and Chaos Space Marines. You've got tons and tons of orcs. You've got tons of everything. And a lot of people want to print those because there's something different. It makes their army visually diverse, or they really like the army, but they want to go with a slightly different aesthetic. Now, for a lot of people, that means you either have to kit bash or you have to 3D print. And kit bashing can be very time consuming. In my personal play group, we use a lot of 3D printed models, and a lot of them are alternate sculpts. We find it cool to have all these different dynamic poses for games like Star Wars Legion and Blood and Plunder, where maybe we feel like the stock poses are maybe getting a little old and we want to do something new. And that, I think, is where 3D printing really shines, is people who made their own individual take on the subject matter to create something new and unique. That, I think, is definitely appropriate to print because it's not really stealing, it's more taking inspiration from the original product. But then we come to the third point, accessibility. Some time ago, on one of my painting streams on a Saturday on Twitch, link right up there, I had a viewer come through who is from Brazil. Now, this viewer ran a 3D printing business, and he told me that the Indominus box set for Warhammer 40,000 cost the equivalent of 2 months of income for his place of residence. Now, keep in mind that the Indominus box set was retailed for 200 American dollars. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not going to buy any box set for 2 months of income. It's just not going to happen. But that's the thing. In a lot of parts of the world, it's just very expensive to play certain games, often because of shipping. In those situations, you maybe just don't have access to the official models. And even if you do, maybe they are just so outrageously priced that you just cannot possibly afford it. In those places, 3D printing kind of becomes a necessity if you want to play the game. If you do alternate sculpts, that's great, but if you're doing the official sculpt, you do still have to ask yourself the question, am I okay with supporting theft? I've seen a lot of stuff get taken off of Thingiverse because Games Workshop makes a lot of effort to comb through the STL files and get rid of the things that are copies of their original work. And I don't dispute their right to do that. I think that, they're protecting their work. They want to get paid for the work that they do. It makes sense. But the problem is that so many people simply cannot afford miniature wargaming as a hobby. This hobby is expensive. It costs a lot of money to buy the models and buy the glue and buy the paint and buy the varnish and buy the things that we transport them in. It just costs a lot of money. And a lot of people, in order to make that work, have to cut costs, and 3D printing is a great way to do that. Some people aren't okay with proxies in their games, and so the whole visually unique and distinct sculpts made by someone else aren't viable for the play group you want to be in. In those situations, if you can't buy the official models and you can't use proxies, you basically have to 3D print the copies. The thing is, there's no good answer to all of this. There's no good answer to what's appropriate to 3D print. There are some games like Dungeons and Dragons that are basically designed for 3D printing. All the terrain and the character minis and everything. 3D printing is so great for those because they don't really have a strictly official model line. They have models that are made for the game, but there's no requirement to use them in any respect. But in a lot of miniature war games that aren't tabletop RPGs, there's this expectation that you're going to use the official models so that everyone knows what it is you're playing. For myself, I like using the official models where I can, but for a lot of the Forge World stuff for Games Workshop or some of the larger ships for Blood and Plunder, that's just too expensive for me. I don't know what the answer is, because there isn't one. You have to make the decision on what you are comfortable with as an individual. What do you think is the appropriate use of 3D printing in miniature wargaming? Do you think that everything is allowed, or do you think that the usage should be narrowed significantly? If you have any opinions, let me know down in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video or found it helpful in any respect, please consider leaving a like, subscribing, hitting the little bell icon to get notifications for when a new video goes live. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.